He smirked, sipped from my Navy SEAL mug, and said, "Relax, old man. I'll handle this." Behind him, my wife stood wearing the shirt that saw me through combat, now wrapped around the man who'd stolen my house, my truck, and every dollar I earned while deployed. Then she added, "Kyle lives here now. We were going to tell you." That was the second I realized. This wasn't just cheating. It was war. They drained our accounts, emptied my safe, and filed for divorce before I even touched U.S. soil. But what they didn't know? I don't fight fire with fire. I use facts, silence, and a $97,000 hospital bill they never saw coming. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Matthew Colton, and I'm 34 years old. Between SEAL deployments, I live in our waterfront cottage in Maine, where my wife Jane manages our life while I'm overseas. My muscles ache as I stare at the dusty Kandahar sky, thinking about the silver bracelet I just mailed to her. A small thanks for 12 years of holding down the fort. These days, Jane's texts feel different, shorter, but that's normal with the stress of separation. The cottage needs work, but Jane handles everything. Bills, repairs, our joint accounts. She even has power of attorney since I'm gone so much. The familiar scent of sea salt and pine fills my mind as I dream of home, of her smile when I return. The irony of training to spot danger while missing what's right in front of me. But let me start from the beginning. 3 months later, I landed at Portland International on a misty Tuesday morning. No family waiting with signs, no brass band, just me and my weathered duffel bag. The rental car smelled like pine air freshener and somebody else's coffee, but it'd do for the 20-minute drive home. You ever notice how everything looks smaller when you've been away? The harbor shops had shrunk, and McGinty's Bait and Tackle had a fresh coat of paint I didn't recognize. Even our cottage seemed different as I pulled up, neater somehow, with new curtains in the windows and an unfamiliar blue hybrid parked where my truck should have been. The gravel crunched under my boots as I grabbed my bag. 12 years of combat training had taught me to notice details. 2 sets of prints in the muddy path, men's running shoes by the welcome mat, laughter drifting through the screen door. My hand froze halfway to the knocker. That's when the door swung open. He stood there shirtless, all tattooed muscle and styled hair, holding my favorite Navy SEAL coffee mug, the one my unit gave me after my first tour. Steam rose from it like it was his morning routine, like he belonged there. "Can I help you?" He had this smirk, the kind you want to wipe off with sandpaper. Before I could answer, Jane appeared behind him. She was wearing my old SEAL team shirt like it meant nothing, like it hadn't seen me through hell and back. Her hand settled on his bare shoulder, familiar, possessive. "Matthew." Her voice was flat, unsurprised. "You're early." The world tilted sideways for a second. You know that moment in a firefight when everything slows down? When your training kicks in and your body moves without thinking? This wasn't like that. This was quicksand. "You're always gone," Jane continued, each word precise and practiced. "I needed a man who's actually here." The guy, couldn't have been more than 26, had the nerve to chuckle. He stepped forward, clapped me on the shoulder like we were old buddies. "Relax, old man. I'll handle this." Handle this. Those words hit harder than any IED I'd ever encountered. My coffee mug in his hands, my shirt on her body, my house under his feet. And he'd handle it? I didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. But inside, something cracked. Not like a clean break you can splint and heal. More like a spider web spreading through bulletproof glass. You don't see the damage until the whole thing shatters. Jane crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Kyle lives here now. We've been meaning to tell you, but..." She shrugged. Like forgetting to mention she'd replaced me was the same as forgetting to buy milk. Kyle. He had a name. He had my life. And he was still holding my damn coffee mug. The morning fog rolled in from the bay, thick and cold. Somewhere, a seagull screamed, and I remembered teaching Jane the different calls that first summer. How she'd laughed when I told her you could predict the weather by how they flew. Now she was looking at me like I was a stranger trespassing on her property. "Your truck's gone," she added, almost as an afterthought. Kyle needed something to drive. Of course he did. I adjusted my duffel strap, felt the familiar weight of my dog tags under my shirt. 12 years of service, and this was my homecoming. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't drawing blood. I turned without a word, my boots crunching back down the gravel path. Behind me, I heard Kyle's smug voice. "See? Told you I'd handle it." The rental car still smelled like someone else's coffee. I sat there for a moment, hands steady on the wheel, watching my life play out in someone else's theater. The screen door slammed. Through the window, I saw them laughing. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't come at you with guns blazing. It doesn't announce itself with sirens and flares. It stands in your doorway, drinks from your cup, and tells you to relax while it burns your world to the ground. I drove until the coastline disappeared in my rear view. The rental's GPS kept trying to recalculate my route home, but home wasn't home anymore. Funny how technology can't keep up with betrayal. Remember those moments before a night op, when everything goes quiet inside? When your breath steadies and your mind clears? That's where I went. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. I just drove. 2 hours later, I pulled into a Motel 6 parking lot, the kind of place that doesn't ask questions when you pay cash. The room smelled like old cigarettes and broken dreams, but it was better than watching Kyle drink coffee from my mug. You ever notice how motels always have these tiny coffee makers? I stared at it while my laptop booted up, thinking about all those mornings I'd video called Jane from overseas, how she'd hold up her own cup, pretending we were sharing breakfast across the miles. The joint account login still worked. Small mercies, right? But the numbers hit like a punch to the gut. $247.13 remaining. Last week it had 6 figures. 12 years of combat pay, hazard bonuses, investment returns, gone. Just gone. My hands started shaking then. Not from anger, from something colder. Accessed yesterday at 2:47 p.m., the transaction log showed, while I was still in the air, flying home to her. The room's AC kicked in with a rattle that sounded like distant gunfire. I picked up my phone, called our bank's fraud department. The woman on the line was sympathetic but firm. "I'm sorry, sir, but Mrs. Colton had full power of attorney. The transfers were legal." Legal? Right. Next stop, our safe deposit box. The one where I'd kept emergency cash, my grandfather's watch, and my first set of seal pins. The bank manager's face said it all before he opened the box. Empty, like our vows, like her promises. "Mrs. Colton accessed it 3 days ago," he explained, shuffling paperwork. Everything was in order. Everything was in order. That phrase kept echoing as I drove back to the motel. Jane had planned this like a tactical op. While I was clearing buildings in Kandahar, she was clearing out our life. The voicemail came that evening. Some lawyer with a voice like oiled silk. "Mr. Colton, this is Herbert Walsh representing Jane in your divorce proceedings. Given your military background and potential stress-related issues, we strongly suggest anger management counseling before—" I deleted it before he finished. Stress-related issues. That's what they were calling it now? I'd spent 12 years keeping my head clear in firefights, making split-second decisions with lives on the line. Now, they wanted to paint me as unstable? The legal notice arrived by courier the next morning. 23 pages of legalese that boiled down to one thing. Jane wanted everything. The house by the bay, my pension, alimony. She cited emotional abandonment and financial neglect. Claimed my deployments had left her unsupported and isolated. I sat on the motel bed, reading each page twice. The AC unit rattled like a broken Humvee. Outside, someone's kid was crying. I thought about all those care packages I'd sent, all those video calls I'd made at 3 a.m. my time, just to catch her before work. All those times I'd transferred extra money so she could treat herself. The papers trembled slightly in my hands. Not from rage, from recognition. This wasn't just Jane running off with some gym rat. This wasn't just a broken home or an empty bank account. This was calculated, coordinated. They hadn't just taken my present. They were trying to take my future. You know what the first rule of warfare is? Know your enemy. I opened my laptop again, started a new document. At the top, I typed, Timeline of events. Below that, Financial records. Then, Witness list. The AC rattled again. This time, it sounded like loading rounds. The storage unit's roll-up door groaned like an old sailor as I lifted it. The sound echoed through the empty facility. Just me and rows of identical metal boxes stretching into the shadows. It was close to midnight, but I needed my gear. More importantly, I needed space to think. The familiar weight of my deployment bag settled against my shoulder as I hefted it out. 12 years of muscle memory kicked in, checking straps, testing zippers, cataloging contents. Everything was where I'd left it, vacuum-sealed and protected. The discipline of it all steadied my hands. Behind the bag sat a plastic tote marked Home Security. I almost walked past it, but something nagged at me. Jane had always complained about those cameras, said they made her feel watched. Now I knew why. The main system backed up to our cloud account, which she'd probably wiped. But I'd always kept physical backups, old habits from too many missions where digital trails disappeared. Inside the tote, wrapped in bubble wrap, was a stack of SD cards labeled by month. You know that moment in movies where everything goes quiet? When the protagonist finds that one piece that changes everything? Yeah, it was nothing like that. Just me, sitting cross-legged on concrete, watching thumbnails load on my laptop screen. First clip, Jane leading Kyle through our front door. Second clip, them in our kitchen, his hands all over her. I forced myself to keep scanning. Then, there it was. Kyle setting up ring lights in our bedroom. Jane adjusting what looked like a professional camera. Both of them checking angles, testing sound. My stomach clenched. The next clips confirmed it. They were shooting adult content. In my house. On my bed. Some clips showed familiar corners of rooms I'd painted myself. Others, let's just say they got creative with my workshop tools. That part hit harder than finding them together. They weren't just living in my space. They were selling it. The timestamps told a story. Regular filming schedules, multiple setups, practiced routines. This wasn't amateur hour. This was a business. I remembered that fresh cup of coffee Kyle had been holding when he answered my door. The same mug I'd brought back from a mission in Turkey. Now I wondered how many of their fans had seen it in the background of their videos. The desert teaches you patience. When you're waiting for intel, watching a target, every minute counts. But you don't rush. You don't let emotion cloud your judgment. So I did what I'd learned. I documented everything. Timestamps, room locations, equipment visible in shots. Then I made 3 copies of the important clips. At 0200, I sent an encrypted file to Nolan Grady. We'd served 2 tours together before he went into cybersecurity. His response came within minutes. You up for a call? Nolan's voice was sharp, despite the hour. Jesus, Matt, this is professional grade stuff. They're not just posting random clips. What do you mean? These angles, the lighting setup, this is subscription content. Probably have a dedicated platform. Keys clicked in the background. Give me 24 hours. I'll trace the digital footprint. They cleaned out my accounts, Nolan. I need to know what I'm dealing with. Brother, based on what I'm seeing, this goes deeper than empty bank accounts. More clicking. Their equipment alone. That's not OnlyFans budget. That's serious investment. I thought about Jane's sudden interest in our finances last year. How she'd insisted on handling the taxes herself. Can you follow the money? Already am. First Pass shows multiple payment processors, crypto wallets. They're moving serious cash. He paused. Matt, some of these transactions trace back months before your last deployment. The concrete floor seemed to tilt under me. How many months? You sure you want to know? How many? 8, maybe 9. His voice softened. There's more. Your address is listed as the business location for their LLC. Filing date? 2 weeks after you deployed. I pressed my knuckles against my eyes until lights popped. They hadn't just stolen my money. They'd turned my home into their studio, used my deployment as cover, probably filed business expenses against my taxes. Nolan, what are my options? Legally? This is gold, brother. Tax fraud. Unauthorized business use of property. Digital piracy if they used your internet. And if they filed joint taxes while running this operation. He let out a low whistle. The IRS loves cases like this. How long to build a case? Give me 48 hours. I'll get you everything. Bank records, business filings, subscriber data. They thought they were smart using crypto, but they got sloppy, left breadcrumbs everywhere. I looked at the SD cards spread around me, at the deployment bag that had seen me through so many missions. Send me what you find, all of it. Copy that. And Matt? Don't do anything stupid. Let the system work for once. Roger that. I ended the call and sat there in the silence, surrounded by evidence of their betrayal. The storage unit's fluorescent lights hummed overhead like distant drones. The next morning, Nolan's data dump hit my encrypted email like a tactical strike. Screenshots, spreadsheets, transaction logs, enough digital evidence to fill a server farm. I spread it across my motel desk, coffee going cold beside me as I pieced it together. It's bigger than we thought, Nolan said over the secure line. They've got multiple revenue streams running through your home network. OnlyFans is just the surface. I rubbed my temples. Break it down for me. Primary incomes through a premium content site. Subscription-based, exclusive material. Then there's custom requests, private shows, merchandise. His keyboard clicked rapidly. But here's where it gets interesting. They're routing everything through shell accounts and crypto wallets. Classic money laundering setup. How much are we talking? Conservative estimate? About 12 grand monthly? All untaxed. He paused. And that's not counting their Ethereum mining operation. That caught me off guard. Their what? Remember that weird power spike in your electric bills last spring? They converted your garage into a mining rig. Been running it 24/7 since you deployed. That's another 3,000 to 4,000 monthly in passive crypto. The garage, where I used to work on my grandfather's old Harley. Now it was their private mint. Everything ties back to my house. IP address, shipping records, business registration. It all points to your property. But here's the kicker. They're using your identity for some of it. Parts of your social, your DD-214 details, even your deployment dates in their business timeline. My jaw clenched. During those long nights in the desert, I'd imagined Jane watching our security cameras, feeling safer because I'd installed them. Instead, she'd used them to frame their shots. Your internet history shows regular uploads to cloud storage, streaming services I won't name, and dozens of crypto exchanges. Nolan's tone shifted. Matt, they didn't just steal your money. They built their whole operation on your identity. If the IRS or FBI starts digging, I'd be liable. Exactly. Your name's all over this. Power bills, internet service, property records. You're legally exposed. I thought about those nights overseas when I'd approve her random requests for extra funds. Emergency house repairs, she'd said. Now I knew where that money really went. Give me options, Nolan. We've got enough for law enforcement. Tax fraud, identity theft, unauthorized business operations, take your pick. But court cases are messy, public. Your name would be everywhere. He was right. A court battle would drag everything into the open. My unit, my service record, all of it splashed across legal documents anyone could access. There's something else, Nolan added. Their subscriber count dropped last month. Big time. They're getting desperate for content, taking bigger risks. What kind of risks? Public shoots, outdoor locations. They're pushing boundaries to keep subscribers, more typing. According to their private messages, they're planning something at the marina this weekend. Your marina. The place where I'd proposed to Jane, where we used to watch sunsets before deployments. Now they were going to turn it into their backdrop. Send me everything you found, all of it. Already packaging it. But Matt, we need this to be clean, legal. No room for... A sharp knock cut him off. Through the motel window, I saw a police cruiser in the parking lot. Hold that thought. I moved to the door, spine straight, hands visible. 2 officers stood outside. Behind them, Kyle leaned against my old truck, arms crossed, that same smug grin from my doorstep plastered across his face. Mr. Colton? The older officer checked his notepad. We've got a complaint about threatening messages. Mind if we talk? I looked past them at Kyle, who winked and held up his phone. He'd manufactured evidence, tried to paint me as the unstable vet. Classic misdirection. But he'd made a crucial mistake. He'd done it in public, with witnesses and cameras. Officers, I said calmly, I think I can clear this up. Would you like to see my phone? The younger cop glanced at his partner. They hadn't expected cooperation. Behind them, Kyle's grin faltered. He hadn't counted on me being ready. Hadn't realized that every move he made, every report he filed, only added to my evidence trail. In my ear, Nolan was still on the line. Matt, what's happening? I watched Kyle shift uneasily by my truck, suddenly less sure of his plan. Stand by, I said quietly. I think our friend just handed us exactly what we needed. The weekend farmers' market buzzed with its usual morning crowd. Fresh bread, local honey, kids chasing each other between stalls, normal Saturday stuff. I'd gotten word through Nolan that Kyle liked to strut through here, playing lifestyle influencer with Jane's credit card. Sure enough, there he was by the organic coffee stand, holding court with his little entourage. 4 guys who looked like they lived at the gym, all wearing matching branded workout gear. Kyle was mid-story, gesturing with my old travel mug, the one I'd brought back from that mission in Morocco. I didn't approach, didn't call out, just stood there browsing tomatoes, letting him catch glimpses of me through the crowd. The back of my neck prickled each time his voice faltered. You ever watch a pressure gauge climb into the red? That's what Kyle's face did over the next 20 minutes. Every time he spotted me, his jaw got tighter. His laugh got louder, more forced. His stories to his bros got bigger. So I told this dude, right? I said, listen, old man. Kyle's voice carried across 3 stalls. I moved to the honey vendor next to his group. Still didn't look at him. Just stood there, examining jars like I had all day. Because I did. Yo, that him? One of his friends whispered. Not quietly enough. Yeah, that's the guy, Kyle said, voice rising. The one I was telling you about. Can't take a hint. Keeps showing up places. I picked up a jar of wildflower honey, held it to the light. The vendor, an older lady with kind eyes, noticed Kyle's group and frowned. Hey, I'm talking to you, man. Kyle stepped closer, coffee sloshing in my travel mug. You following me now? I turned slowly, met his eyes, kept my voice level. Public market, free country. Not when you're stalking people, it's not. He played to his audience, puffing up. This is harassment, bro. I got witnesses. Interesting choice of words. I gestured at the mug in his hand. That's mine, by the way. His face flushed. Your wife gave it to me, along with everything else you left behind. Actually, according to property records, I didn't leave anything behind. I smiled slightly. But we can discuss that in court next month. That hit something. Kyle stepped into my space, coffee forgotten. You threatening me? Just stating facts. I stayed perfectly still. Would you like more? I've got quite a list. Listen up, you psycho. He jabbed a finger at my chest. I didn't flinch. Careful. Lots of phones out today. His eyes darted around. Sure enough, several market-goers had their cameras up, sensing drama. Kyle's friends shifted uncomfortably. You think I'm scared of you? Kyle's voice cracked slightly. You think your tough guy act means anything? No act, just patience. I met his glare. And a really good paper trail. That did it. Kyle swung wild, coffee spraying as the mug went flying. I stepped back, letting his momentum carry him forward. His designer sneaker hit the spilled coffee and he stumbled, arms windmilling. The bike rack caught him right in the ribs. The crack was audible. Kyle screamed. Not a tough guy yell, but a high, breathless sound of real pain. He curled around himself, face gone chalk white. Someone call an ambulance. One of his friends finally moved, panicked. I stayed where I was, hands visible, face neutral. Phones recorded everything. The honey vendor had already dialed 911. He attacked you, she said firmly. We all saw it. Kyle tried to speak, but only managed a wet cough. A small crowd gathered, muttering, phones still up. His friends backed away, not wanting to be in the footage. Sirens grew closer. I knelt beside Kyle, just out of reach. The thing about patience? I kept my voice low, calm. It lets you see the whole picture. Every transaction, every upload, every identity theft. His eyes widened through the pain. 30 days, I said softly. Starting now. The EMTs arrived fast, efficient. As they loaded Kyle into the ambulance, one of them whistled at the injury. Multiple fractures, possible internal bleeding. This is going to be an expensive trip, sir. Kyle's face, already pale, went ghost white. He knew what I knew. He'd let Jane cancel their health insurance last month to save money for new camera gear. I watched the ambulance pull away, lights flashing. The market slowly returned to normal. The honey vendor handed me the travel mug, now sporting a fresh crack down one side. No charge for the show, she said with a wink. I checked my watch. 30 days until the court date. Time enough for hospital bills to land, payment demands to stack up, and pressure to build. Kyle had tried to play tough guy in front of an audience. Now he had what every influencer craves, viral footage, but not the kind he wanted. 3 weeks after the market incident, I sat in Nolan's home office, surrounded by monitors showing scrolling data. Empty energy drink cans littered his desk, testament to late nights tracking digital breadcrumbs. Check this out, Nolan said, pointing to a transaction log. Your wife's been busy. 3 withdrawals from different crypto exchanges last week. She's liquidating fast. I leaned in, studying the numbers. Getting nervous? Oh, yeah. And look at this. He pulled up a social media feed. She's trying to maintain the image, but the mask is slipping. Jane's latest post showed her doing yoga on our deck, my deck, with some inspirational quote about staying true to your path. The comments weren't kind. Word had gotten around about Kyle's market meltdown, and her followers were connecting dots. The hospital bill landed yesterday, Nolan mentioned, cracking open another Red Bull. $97,000, give or take. No insurance. Kyle's probably having fun with that one. I remembered something from my early days of training. Pressure doesn't create character. It reveals it. What else? Their content site's gone dark. Subscriber count dropped after Kyle's performance. Nolan grinned. Turns out people don't like paying to watch a tough guy who gets dropped by a bike rack. The memory of that morning still sat heavy in my gut. Not because of Kyle, he'd made his choice, but because of what it represented. The end of something I'd believed in for 12 years. Remember those late-night satellite calls from some dusty forward operating base? Jane would tell me about her day, plans for the house, dreams for our future. Every word now felt like sand in my mouth. "Here's the good stuff," Nolan said, breaking my reverie. He pulled up a document dense with highlighted sections. Tax records. 3 years of unreported income. They used your social security number for some transactions. That's identity theft. Plus, all that adult content was filmed in your house, using your property, while you still owned everything. The property angle matters? Makes it fraud, not just tax evasion. They profited from assets they didn't own. Nolan sat back, looking satisfied. The IRS loves cases like this. Clean, documented, gift-wrapped. My phone buzzed. Another social media alert. Jane had posted again, this time about healing from toxic relationships. The comments were brutal. Some mentioned Kyle's hospital bills. Others asked about missing subscriber content. One person simply posted, "Karma. She's spiraling," Nolan observed. Posted 6 times today. Usually hits when people are panicking. I nodded, remembering how Jane used to obsess over her follower count, even during our rare dinners together. Any response from their lawyer? Radio silence since we sent the evidence package. Nolan pulled up another screen. But look at this. They've listed the truck for sale. Below market value. They need cash. The truck. My old Tundra. The one I'd seen Kyle driving. The same one I'd taught Jane to drive stick in. Back when every moment together felt like building something real. 2 weeks until court, I said quietly. "You ready for this?" Nolan asked, serious now. "Once we present everything, there's no taking it back. No mercy rule." I thought about Kyle's smirk at my front door. Jane wearing my shirt like it meant nothing. 12 years of deployment savings, drained in a day. "They had their chance for mercy," I replied. "They chose war." Nolan nodded, understanding. He'd been there when I got Jane's last letter overseas, the one promising everything was handled back home. "One more thing," he said, pulling up a final document. "Remember that bracelet you sent her? The silver one? From Kandahar. What about it?" He showed me a marketplace listing. The same bracelet, posted for sale yesterday. Jane's description read, "Never worn. Time to let go of old memories." Something in my chest tightened, then settled. The last thread of doubt finally snapped. "Print everything," I said. "Every transaction, every post, every lie. Court needs to see the whole picture." "Already on it." Nolan's printer hummed to life. By the way, Kyle tried to delete their content archive. Amateur move. I had backups of everything. Professional training kept my voice steady. "Good." The evidence stacked up, page by page. Each sheet, another nail in a coffin they'd built themselves. Somewhere across town, Jane was probably posting another carefully filtered photo, pretending her world wasn't shrinking. 14 days left. The clock kept ticking. The courthouse hadn't changed since my last deployment. Same weathered brick, same heavy doors that groaned when you pushed them open. Walking in felt like entering another combat zone, just with different rules of engagement. Jane's lawyer, Davidson, was already there, designer suit crisp and ready for battle. He'd been leaving voicemails for weeks, each one dripping with barely veiled threats about my mental state and history of violence. You know what's funny? After 12 years of combat operations, I'd learned that the loudest threats usually came from the weakest positions. "Mr. Colton," Davidson drawled when I entered the mediation room, "I trust you're feeling stable today?" I set my briefcase down carefully. "Never better." The mediator, Judge Harrison, studied both of us over her reading glasses. She had that seen-it-all look you get from decades of watching people's lives fall apart in front of you. Shall we begin? Davidson went first, naturally. He painted a picture of Jane as the lonely military wife, abandoned for months at a time, forced to become self-sufficient. Then came the part about my concerning background. Your Honor, my client has legitimate fears about Mr. Colton's capacity for violence. His service record— My service record, I interrupted quietly, includes 3 commendations for protecting civilians under fire. Would you like to see those citations? Judge Harrison's eyebrow lifted slightly. Mr. Davidson, I suggest you focus on the relevant matters at hand. I caught a whiff of Jane's perfume as she shifted in her chair, the same scent she used to wear when I'd come home from deployment. The memory stung like cordite. Now then, Judge Harrison continued, regarding the division of assets. Your Honor, I opened my briefcase. I have evidence that may affect these proceedings. The binder made a solid thump when it hit the table. 300 pages of financial records, screenshots, and transaction logs, all meticulously organized by date and category. Nolan's work was beautiful, clean, clear, and devastating. What's this? Davidson reached for the binder. Documentation of unreported income, digital fraud, identity theft. I kept my voice level. And misuse of property for commercial purposes. Judge Harrison began flipping through pages. Her expression didn't change, but her posture straightened. Mr. Davidson, are you aware of these activities? Davidson's face flushed. He hadn't expected this. He'd thought he was dealing with another angry ex-husband. All emotion and no strategy. Your Honor, this is clearly an attempt to— Page 47 shows the use of my Social Security number. I continued. Page 63 details the conversion of my property for adult content production. All time-stamped, all while I was deployed. Jane's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. She'd seen the subscriber counts, the payment records, the dates that matched her claims of emotional abandonment. This is— Judge Harrison paused on a particular page. Quite detailed. We need a recess, Davidson announced, standing abruptly, to review these allegations. My phone vibrated. A text from Nolan. Found it. 0 income declared last fiscal year. Complete fraud. Sending now. I thought about the nights I'd spent in forward operating bases, reviewing our joint account statements, making sure Jane had everything she needed. All while she was building this secret empire on my foundation. Your Honor, I said, I've just received additional evidence of tax fraud. Would you like me to add it to the record? Davidson's face went from red to white. He whispered something to Jane, who shook her head sharply. The perfume drifted again, but this time it just smelled artificial. Judge Harrison closed the binder. This changes the scope of our proceedings considerably. She fixed Jane with a steady look. Mrs. Colton, are you prepared to address these financial discrepancies? Jane finally met my eyes. I saw something there I'd never seen before. Fear, not of violence. She knew me better than that. Fear of consequence. We request 24 hours, Davidson said stiffly. To prepare our response. Judge Harrison nodded. Granted, but I strongly suggest you review these materials carefully. This has moved beyond simple asset division. As they gathered their things, I stayed seated, hands folded on the table, calm, contained. Everything a SEAL should be. Davidson paused at the door. This isn't over, Mr. Colton. No, I agreed. It's just starting. The door closed behind them. Judge Harrison gave me a long look before gathering her papers. Interesting strategy, Mr. Colton. Not strategy, Your Honor. Just truth. She almost smiled. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9. I waited until I was alone before checking Nolan's full message. The tax fraud evidence was even clearer than we'd hoped. A complete contradiction of every financial statement they'd filed. My training had taught me to always keep 1 round in reserve. Now I had my final shot loaded and ready. That night, Nolan's kitchen smelled like coffee and gun oil. He'd been cleaning his old service weapon while I stared out his window at the harbor lights. The same waters I'd grown up on looked different now. Darker, maybe? Or just less forgiving? You know what gets me? I turned the cracked mug in my hands, the one I'd grabbed from the house that first day. It's not even about the money. Nolan set down his cleaning cloth. Talk to me. 12 years of service, multiple deployments, every mission, every firefight. My throat tightened. I kept thinking about getting home to her. Building something real. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, marking time like a heartbeat. Through the window, a fishing boat's running lights blinked across the bay, reminding me of nights I'd spent on watch, dreaming of home. When I bought that house, I continued, I remember thinking, this is it. This is where we'll grow old. Maybe raise kids someday. I let out a hollow laugh. Now, it's just another crime scene. Nolan poured more coffee, the rich aroma cutting through the gun oil. They tried to take everything. Almost did. I traced the chip on the mug's handle. You know what she told her lawyer? Said I was emotionally unstable. Like my service made me dangerous. The words tasted bitter. 12 years of protecting people, and she turned it into a weapon against me. That's what kills you, isn't it? Nolan leaned back, eyes sharp behind his glasses. Not the betrayal, the disrespect. He was right. The memory of that smirking kid in my doorway, wearing my life like a borrowed jacket, made my hands shake. I gripped the mug tighter. I could have ended it that day, I admitted quietly. One punch. Just one. Everything I learned in the teams. I trailed off, remembering the weight of training, the muscle memory of violence held in check. But you didn't. No. I set the mug down carefully, because that's what they expected. The unstable vet, losing control. And then everything I built, everything I earned, gone in a second. Nolan nodded slowly. So you chose dignity. I chose the long game. The words came out stronger than I felt. But sometimes I wonder if I should have just... Don't. Nolan's voice was firm. That's not you, Matt. Never was. The harbor fog was rolling in now, softening the lights until they looked like memories. I thought about my first deployment, how young I'd been, how sure of everything. You know what scares me? Part of me died in that doorway. The part that trusted. That believed in something bigger than the mission. Good. Nolan's response surprised me. Because that naive kid wouldn't survive what's coming. But you? The man sitting here? He gestured at the evidence files spread across his table. You're built for this kind of war. My hands found the mug again, fingers tracing the crack that split it nearly in half. Like my life, before and after. The weight of everything I'd almost lost pressed down. My career, my home, my name. All the things that made me who I was. 48 hours, I murmured, until the trial. Nolan gathered his cleaning supplies. You ready? I lifted the mug, studied how the crack caught the light. For a moment, just a moment, I felt the urge to hurl it against the wall, to let go of the control I'd maintained since that first betrayal, to be the man they thought I was. Instead, I set it down gently. Yeah. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the familiar calm of pre-mission focus settle in. I'm ready. The fog had swallowed the harbor completely now, but I didn't need to see the water to know it was there. Some things you just know, deep in your bones, like the difference between revenge and justice, like the weight of dignity against the pull of rage. Nolan started packing up his files. Get some sleep, brother. Tomorrow we prep final statements. I nodded, eyes still on the mug. The crack hadn't destroyed it, just changed its story. Maybe that's what mattered in the end. Not what breaks you, but how you handle the breaking. I'd seen a lot of courtrooms in my time, mostly for depositions after missions gone sideways, but this one felt different. The polished oak, the heavy silence, the weight of every eye-tracking movement. My service dress blues still fit perfectly, ribbons and insignia catching the morning light through tall windows. The same couldn't be said for Kyle. His designer suit hung loose, like he'd been losing weight. Gone was the cocky gym rat who'd answered my door that day. He kept fidgeting with his collar, shooting nervous glances at his lawyer. Their side opened with theater, all broad gestures and dramatic pauses. "Your Honor, my client has endured systematic emotional abandonment." The lawyer's voice droned on, painting me as some kind of ticking time bomb. Every few minutes, he'd gesture toward my ribbons like they were evidence of instability rather than service. I thought about those nights in Kandahar, the weight of responsibility, the lives depending on steady hands and clear minds, if they only knew what real instability looked like. "Counselor," the judge cut in, "I've heard enough character speculation. Do you have any factual evidence to support these claims?" That's when things got interesting. Their lawyer stumbled, started shuffling papers. "Well, Your Honor, we have social media posts indicating—" "Facts," the judge repeated. "Documentation, financial records." My team didn't shuffle anything. Nolan had prepared 3 identical binders, each tab color-coded and annotated. The evidence unfolded like a tactical briefing: IP addresses, transaction logs, property ownership documents, time-stamped footage, metadata. All tied to my house, my accounts, my name. But none of it with my knowledge or consent. The courtroom fell so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning hum. Kyle's face went from pale to ghost white when we got to the crypto wallet records. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, kept her eyes down, but her hands were shaking. "Furthermore," my lawyer continued, "we have documentation of unreported income exceeding 6 figures, all generated through unauthorized use of Mr. Colton's property and identity." He paused, letting that sink in. "The IRS has been notified." I watched Kyle's mother in the gallery. She'd always treated me like family during holidays, proud to have a seal for a son-in-law. Now she was staring at Kyle like she'd never seen him before. When the judge called for final arguments, I caught her wiping tears with trembling fingers. The ruling would come later, but everyone knew. You could feel it in the air, that shift when truth hits harder than any story you've tried to tell yourself. Kyle bolted as soon as the judge left, nearly knocking over his chair. My wife followed, but slower, like she was walking underwater. Outside, reporters clustered on the courthouse steps. Questions flew like shrapnel. "Mr. Colton, how do you respond to allegations?" I kept walking, steady and straight, just like I'd done 1,000 times under fire. The morning sun felt different now, warmer somehow. A weight I'd carried since that day at my front door was finally lifting. For the first time in weeks, I let myself smile. Not because I'd won. Victory wasn't the point. I smiled because I'd stayed true to who I was, fought clean, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. Nolan caught up with me at the bottom of the steps. "You good?" I nodded, watching Kyle's mother hurry to her car, still dabbing at her eyes. Some collateral damage you can't avoid, no matter how precise your strike. "Yeah, I'm good." A camera flash caught my smile, probably making me look smug or satisfied, but they didn't understand. This wasn't about revenge or even justice. This was about standing your ground when the world tries to rewrite your story. My phone buzzed, a message from the realtor about the fishing charter business I was looking at. Life moving forward, one step at a time. I straightened my cover, adjusted my ribbons, and headed for my truck. The war was almost over, but the mission? That was just beginning. 3 days after the courthouse steps, the ruling came down like a precision strike. I'd seen enough operations to know timing matters more than force. The judge didn't waste words. In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, she adjusted her glasses, scanning the documented betrayals laid out in black and white. This court finds the defendant, Kyle Merrick, liable for civil damages related to identity theft, wire fraud, and unauthorized commercial use of private property. Kyle slumped in his chair. Gone was the gym swagger, the social media smile. His lawyer whispered something, but Kyle just stared straight ahead, jaw working like he was chewing glass. Furthermore, the judge continued, regarding the petition for alimony and property division, she turned to Jane, who dressed like she was heading to a lifestyle blog photo shoot. Mrs. Colton, your claims are denied. The court finds clear evidence of financial misconduct and exploitation of marital assets. I remembered that silver bracelet I'd sent from Kandahar, how Jane had probably been wearing it while filming content in our bedroom. The thought still burned, but differently now, more like an old scar than a fresh wound. The residence at 2274 Harbor View Drive will remain solely in Mr. Colton's name, as will the Ford F-150 registered to the property. The judge's gavel punctuated each decision. Additionally, all digital content produced on said property is hereby ordered removed from distribution platforms within 48 hours. Jane's perfect facade cracked. Just a little, but I caught it. That slight tremor in her lower lip, the same tell she'd had when we first dated, and she was trying not to cry during sad movies. Funny how some details stick with you. Their social media empire crumbled within hours. The judge's ruling hit their circles like a flashbang. Bright, loud, and impossible to ignore. Jane's lifestyle blog subscribers started unfollowing in waves. Kyle's fitness accounts went dark. Their carefully curated image shattered faster than that coffee mug he'd been holding in my kitchen. 2 weeks later, I drove to the house, my house, with the final paperwork. The November wind cut sharp off the bay, carrying that salt tang I'd missed during deployments. Jane was waiting on the porch, trying to look composed in designer yoga wear that probably cost more than my first month's military pay. "Matthew, She started to reach out, then let her hand fall. I handed her the court-stamped property transfer. Simple, clean, final. Then I pulled out that cracked mug, the one Kyle had been holding that morning. The chip in the handle had grown bigger, spiderwebbing down one side. "This belongs here," I said, setting it on the porch railing. The morning light caught the crack just right, making it look deeper than it was. "Please," she whispered, "can we just—" "No." The word came out quiet, but firm, like calling a shot on the range. "We can't." Something shifted in her eyes then. Maybe understanding, maybe just defeat. She looked down at the paperwork, at her perfect manicure gripping the edges too tight. The woman who'd posted about living her best life while dismantling mine couldn't meet my gaze anymore. I turned to leave, boots crunching on the gravel I'd laid down years ago. Behind me, I heard a small sound. Might have been a sob, might have been the wind. Didn't matter. Some bridges you don't rebuild. The truck started on the first try, familiar rumble settling into my bones. Through the rearview mirror, I watched Jane standing there, papers in one hand, broken mug still on the rail. She looked small suddenly, nothing like the confident betrayer who'd torn my world apart. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I'd fought clean, won fair, and now it was time to move forward. The morning sun caught my ribbons as I drove away, leaving Jane Colton and everything she represented in the growing distance. 3 weeks after the court ruling, I stood on Simpson's dock, watching the winter sunrise paint the bay in colors no camera could capture. The old fishing boat, my dad's pride before cancer took him, bobbed gently against the weathered pilings. Fresh paint gleamed on her hull. Second wind, lettered in careful strokes across the stern. You know that feeling when a plan comes together? When all those small details you've been juggling finally click into place? That's what hit me as I ran my hand along the restored gunnel. Every splinter I'd pulled, every bolt I'd replaced, every hour I'd spent rewiring the electronics. It all meant something more than just fixing a boat. The work had kept me focused during the divorce mess. While Jane and Kyle's social media empire imploded, I'd been here with sanders and paint, rebuilding something solid. The boat became my anchor, just like she'd been for my old man when times got rough. I could still smell his pipe tobacco some mornings, mixed with the tang of marine fuel and salt air. "She's looking sharp, Matt." The voice belonged to Pete, the dockmaster who'd known me since I was knee-high to a lobster trap. He shuffled over, coffee steam rising from his thermos. "Your dad would have approved." "Thanks." I checked my watch. 30 minutes until my first charter. "Remember how he used to say a boat's not just wood and metal?" Pete chuckled. "Said it was a state of mind. Man knew his stuff." He squinted at the horizon. "Heard you're running veteran tours?" "Yeah. I secured the last life vest in its holder. Figure some guys need quiet water time more than tourist trips. No pressure, no crowds, just peace and fishing." The morning light caught something in my truck's cup holder. That old cracked mug, handle carefully glued back together. I'd fixed it last week, more out of habit than anything else. Funny how something can lose its power over you, become just another object instead of a symbol. My first clients pulled up right on time. 2 retired Marines, both carrying themselves with that familiar military bearing that never quite leaves you. The younger one had a prosthetic leg. The older showed signs of frost damage on his hands. Neither mentioned it. "Welcome aboard Second Wind," I said, helping them step down onto the deck. "Coffee's hot, tackle's ready, and we've got 6 hours of nothing but water and sky ahead of us." The older Marine, Jim, according to his booking, surveyed the boat with appreciation. "Clean setup you've got here, brother. Running this solo?" "Just me and the fish." I started the engine, its steady pulse familiar as a heartbeat. Sometimes that's all you need. We pushed off as the sun cleared the tree line. The harbor water parted smooth around our bow, gulls wheeling overhead like aerial escorts. I'd done this run hundreds of times as a kid, watching my dad navigate by landmarks and instinct. Now his old charts hung in the wheelhouse, updated but still showing his careful pencil marks. 3 hours later, we had a decent catch on ice, and both men had settled into that peaceful quiet that comes with open water. Jim was working a line near the stern, his frost-damaged hands steady on the rod. His buddy dozed in the afternoon sun, prosthetic leg propped comfortable on a cushioned seat. "You know," Jim said during a lull, "I've done other charters, but this," he gestured at the empty horizon, "this feels different." I nodded, adjusting our drift. "That's the idea." The business was already paying for itself. No debt, no partners, no complications. Just honest work on clean water, helping guys find the same peace I'd rediscovered here. The boat's name wasn't just letters on the stern, it was a promise kept. A new chapter written in salt spray and diesel fuel. Back in the truck that evening, I noticed the mug again. The crack lines were still visible, but the ceramic held together, functional and solid. Kind of like me, I suppose. I'd glued it, because that's what you do with broken things worth saving. You fix them, learn from the damage, and move forward. Tomorrow would bring more veterans, more quiet hours on the water, more healing for them and for me. But right now, watching the sun sink behind the marina office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Contentment, pure and simple, like the lap of waves against a well-loved hull. That's the thing about second winds. Sometimes they blow stronger than the first. The next morning brought that perfect main light, the kind that turns the harbor into liquid gold and makes every weathered board on the dock glow like honey. I'd been up since 4, checking lines and restocking bait, letting muscle memory guide my pre-charter routine. A single set of footsteps echoed across the planks, right on time. My client appeared at the edge of the dock, backpack slung over one shoulder, baseball cap pulled low. Something in his stance spoke of time served. You learn to spot it after a while. "Morning," he said quietly, extending his hand. "Mark Stevens. Called about the Sunrise Tour?" "Matthew Colton." We shook, and I caught the familiar calluses of someone who'd handled weapons for a living. "Welcome aboard Second Wind." He paused at the stern, studying the name I'd carefully painted there 2 weeks ago. Gold leaf caught the early light, making each letter shimmer. Below it, my registration number and home port. All official, all mine. No borrowed glory, no shared ownership, just truth in metal and paint. "Clean vessel," Mark commented, stepping aboard with the natural balance of someone used to moving platforms. "How long you been running charters?" "Couple months." I stowed his bag and handed him a fresh coffee and one of the new mugs I'd bought for clients. "But I grew up on these waters. My old man ran tours for 30 years before me." We pushed off as the sun crept above the tree line. The harbor was quiet this early, just the pulse of my engine and a few seabirds making their morning rounds. Mark settled into the stern seat, content to watch the shoreline slide past. "Appreciate you taking a solo booking," he said after a while. "Most places want groups. Sometimes quiet's better." I adjusted our heading slightly, aiming for my favorite fishing spot. "Especially for guys like us." He nodded, understanding without needing details. That's another thing about vets. Sometimes what's not said matters more than what is. The morning rolled on smooth as silk. We found a good spot, dropped lines, and let the gentle rock of the swells do its work. Mark turned out to be decent company, knew when to talk and when to let silence speak for itself. Around 10, I headed below to grab more coffee. That's when I saw it. My old, cracked mug, sitting clean and quiet on the galley shelf. I'd put it there last week, thinking I might still need it somehow. But looking at it now, I realized something. It was just a mug. Not a symbol, not a reminder, not a wound. Just ceramic and glue, taking up space. Back on deck, Mark was reeling in a decent-sized cod. "Nice morning for it," he said, watching me help with the net. "That it is." I secured his catch in the cooler. "You know, someone once told me fishing's not about the fish. It's about finding your center again." He smiled slightly. "Your old man say that?" "Yeah." I checked our drift, making small adjustments. He had a way of seeing through things. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last wisps of morning fog. My registration numbers gleamed proud on the bow, catching light like a promise kept. Everything earned, everything clean. Mark helped me clean his catch later at the dock. As I wrapped his fish in paper, he paused, looking thoughtful. "You know," he said, "I tried other charters before this. Something different here, though. Peaceful." I nodded, knowing what he meant. "That's the goal. Some things you don't fight head-on. You outlast them." He smiled again, understanding in his eyes, and headed up the dock with his catch. I watched him go, then turned back to my boat. My business, my future. The cracked mug would stay on that shelf, not as a trophy or a reminder, but simply because that's where it belonged now. Part of the past, but not defining the present. The morning light caught my registration numbers again, gold leaf steady and true in the sun. No fanfare, no ceremony, just honest work on clean water, earned one sunrise at a time. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.